Hi, it's Barbara Gray, research professor at Newmark J School at CUNY. This section of our research for reporting series is about finding data and statistics for your daily breaking news and enterprise reporting, and how to find data for your reporting on a community or a beat. You'll learn why data is so important to your stories, where to find data, and how to help you how data can help you fill gaps and find underreported angles on stories. Let's start with the difference between data and statistical data. We'll mostly call both data going forward for this video, but it's an important distinction you need to know. Data refers to the data sets typically collected by governments, local and federal governments, but it's also collected by universities, organizations, and it's often in machine-readable data files. But then there's also statistical data. Statistics are the product of data analysis, the tables, charts, and graphs made up of numbers and percentages that come out of the raw data. A statistic is typically going to be an answer to a question like, how many people are we talking about that do this thing and where? Both data and statistics have a time and a geography component that you need to keep in mind when you're looking for data for your stories. We'll talk more about what else you need to consider when you're looking at data. But first, let's start with the why. So why is data important for your stories? It gives your reader the scope of the problem, why they should care about the story, how big the problem is, who's affected, who's responsible, and how does this issue compare to another neighborhood, city, state, or at the federal level. It can confirm trends that people are telling you about. It can provide the context readers need about why this is even a problem. If there's a report that comes out about a national issue, localize that data and see how it's affected your community and the neighborhood that you're reporting on. Data is also receipts that can lead to impact. If you work from good data and analyze it well, your reporting will have a solidity that will be hard to dismiss. This is a graphic used with permission of the artist, Christine Ho, that beautifully portrays the disinfecting power of sunlight and how you can shine a light on an issue by using underreported data to tell the story. So data can explain the why behind complicated or wicked problems. Those are problems we can't seem to get rid of, like affordable housing and the lack of it across the world. And if you can liberate some data, meaning share data that hasn't been reported on, that will give insight into what's causing the problem and point the way for change to happen. Data equals impact. For that reason, you should strive to give your readers, who are organizers, activists, citizens, and policymakers, data to help illustrate and explain the problems in your story. Here's an example of data-driven impact. Later, I'm going to show you how to find organizations that have data. But now let's look at the evolution of housing data in New York City. For about 10 years or so, there have been housing justice organizations that have been collecting and sharing or liberating government data surrounding rent-stabilized apartments and renting in general in New York City. They've created databases that give the public, tenants, and journalists ways to find out who is the real owner behind the shell company that owns a building and what other buildings that landlord owns. This displacement alert portal is a great example of how an organization liberated data. We can pull in the address of a building and find out things like how many rent-stabilized apartments are still in the building. How many apartments have lost that status? What the change over time has been of those rent-stabilized apartments. You can also find out what sort of litigation against the landlord is happening, and then go to the court's website and look at the details in the civil litigation filings for housing. You can also find out about violations and complaints that were filed, and those can provide some narrative for your story. We'll talk more about how to find these documents in the next module. This data puts a lot of power in the hands of the public, which led tenants to organize and also it led to a lot of great reporting by local and national publications about how landlords were exploiting loopholes in the rent stabilization laws in New York City to evict hundreds of thousands of tenant households and maximize their building as an asset rather than a home. The impact of the data and the reporting was that in 2019, New York State strengthened rent regulations with the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act. Finally, some legislation that provided serious tenant favorable protections, especially right before COVID-19 hit. This works with hyper-local publications and daily stories too. Here's one by AM New York, a daily free paper serving New York City. It's talking about MTA fare hikes. The MTA is the Metropolitan Transit Authority in New York City. The article references ridership. Here's that agency's performance metrics dashboard. We're going to talk about dashboards and open data portals shortly, but this shows current ridership. You can look at ridership over time and see how much it's gone down or up. If fewer people are riding the subway, how are they expecting to get more money out of the riders? Adding data like this can really add context to your daily reporting. Watch the next video on the most common source of data and how to assess the data you want to use.